This is actually so important to learn how to do. Learning how to trust yourself is, whew, it's something that's gonna take. It's gonna take you a minute. I don't have like a booklet on it. I don't have like a manual on it, but I do have my own experience and my own journey that I could share. So we're gonna start there. So I had to write down some notes because I kind of had to figure out how to answer this question, and I think I have a good answer. I said trust and I meant forgive, but that literally is part of my advice. That is literally part of my answer. Learning how to forgive yourself requires you to trust yourself. And let me explain. The first thing you want to do is identify the dynamic that you're in. If you're in a dynamic or in a relationship that has put you in a place where you no longer trust yourself, you don't know how to trust yourself, you don't know how to believe in your experiences, it's so important to identify that dynamic and calling it what it is, right? Whether it's an abusive dynamic or some sort of dysfunctional dynamic, whatever it may be, you have to be able to call it what it is. Like, this is the situation that I'm in. I had to identify that I was in an abusive situation. It wasn't the beginning of my trauma or the beginning of that particular type of abuse that I experienced, but it was definitely the relationship in the moment where I realized what things were and I was able to give things a name. Follow me, okay? If it wasn't for that abusive relationship that I was in, I would not have been able to be the woman that I am today. I would not have been able to identify these toxic, unhealthy patterns within myself, not just in my relationships with other people, but with myself, that played a part in how I showed up in these relationships, whether or not I was a victim or not. If it was not for that relationship, I wouldn't have been at this point where I'm able to call a thing a thing. So it's very important to be able to identify the dynamic that you're in and calling it what it is. So for me, it was abuse. I'm in an abusive relationship. Because I'm in an abusive relationship, now it's time to identify these patterns, okay? As you're identifying these patterns, the next thing you have to do is validate your own experience. You have to learn to validate what you're going through. And I think a very common thing for humans, which makes sense, it's a human thing to want to be validated outside of yourself, to have somebody see you and hear you and believe you, right? Because when they don't, you feel crazy. You feel like something's wrong with you. Like, if nobody is validating my experience, then maybe that's not what happened. Maybe I'm getting it wrong. Maybe I interpreted that in the wrong way. Maybe I'm just focusing on the bad stuff. You start to gaslight yourself in a sense. Identifying the dynamic, calling it what it is, and validating your own experiences is part of the journey. And one of the ways that I was validating myself, and I didn't realize it in the moment, was through journaling. If you pay attention to my content, I don't know, but like, journaling is something I've spoken on before, and it's something I'm going to continue to speak on because journaling literally saved my life. Journaling allows you to release, it allows you to review, it allows you to remember, it allows you to recover and or rebuild, okay? Journaling helps you do all the R's, okay? Being able to sit with a pen in a journal or a book or piece of paper or scratch piece of paper, whatever you end up writing with, having that moment to sit and pause and just be with yourself and get all that out is very cathartic. And because of journaling, I was able to put my feelings in a space where they were safe, right? Because in that relationship, in that abusive relationship that I was in, I was not able to express myself safely. Like, I would express myself to them, but I always had to pay for it later. So I was being trained to like be quiet and take abuse. But part of me was just like, I can't always do this. So I was in between being scared to say things and then sometimes getting to a point where I had to say something no matter how scary it was, right? And that can be really traumatizing. It makes your nerves feel raw, constantly being in this space of survival of, well, being quiet keeps me safe, but also I need to speak up for my safety as well. It can get complex and complicated, but that's neither here nor there. Journaling allows you to release without feeling like somebody is judging everything you're saying, nitpicking at every word, twisting your words around, implementing memories that didn't happen, and making you feel crazy, gaslighting you, giving you word salad in return. You're just with yourself in your journal, getting your thoughts out. And also, what was very important for me was writing about the abusive events that had just transpired. Writing about them as if I'm telling somebody what happened. Writing about them as they happen, and kind of reviewing events like, okay, this happened yesterday, let me write about this, and write about how I'm feeling, and write about what's on my mind, and just going. Because of journaling, I was able to remember things that I probably would have forgot, because that's what abuse does. It makes you forget things. And when you forget things, you don't trust yourself. And when you don't trust yourself, it's hard to get to that point of forgiving yourself at the end of the relationship. Because what are you going to do? You're going to beat yourself up for not remembering certain things. You're going to beat yourself up for not staying away when you left, because you remember all the good stuff, because your brain was like, let's forget all the bad stuff to keep you safe. So journaling allows me and allows others, and I feel like it could allow anybody the experience of remembering everything, even if you're not in an abusive situation. Journaling allows you to retain emotions that have long gone, that you can come back to and read and remember, oh, this is how this particular thing made me feel. Because if you're a people pleaser, right, we tend to, people pleasers, if that is a pattern of yours, right, that is a toxic trait to have. Because, well, we're not going to get into people pleasing, but if you find yourself being a people pleaser, people pleasing, there's a pattern of doing things that you don't really want to do, responding in ways that aren't true to you for the sake of survival. And it gets to a point where you don't know who the hell you're being anymore. And you kind of lose yourself. So when you get to that point of the relationship, or that end of the relationship, or that point in your journey where it's like, okay, I need to forgive myself, you don't know how to do that. It's very hard to do. So journaling saved my life. And then the next thing is boundaries. I'm getting down to 2 minutes, so I'm going to try to wrap this up because I wrote a lot more. Boundaries and forgiving yourself, right? Boundaries, and importantly, practicing those boundaries and believing in your right to those boundaries, right? The boundaries are how you respond to things that don't align with you. Boundaries are not something. This is something I'm not going to allow. Okay. So because you're doing something, or there's something going on that doesn't align with me, I'm going to remove myself. Right. When you respect your own boundaries, and you realize and you honor them, and you understand what your boundaries are, it makes forgiving yourself in the long run so much better, because you know you did what was best for you. Anyway, that's what you were always doing. My point is that forgiving yourself is easy when you trust yourself. And trusting yourself is knowing yourself. So you have to know who you are. And you have to know that who you are is important, who you are is valuable, what you think is valuable, what you say, how you feel, what you do, what you want, what you desire, what you don't want. You matter. You have to understand that. Teach yourself that you matter. Practice believing in yourself, because it's going to pay off. So forgiving yourself is trusting yourself, is knowing yourself. That is the short answer. Sorry for talking so long.